Hey guys, so it's that time again where I look through replays of the top 25 ranked players on Dueling book to see what deck they're playing. Now for those that are new to the channel, I thought I would just lay down how these analyses work so you can pause the video to read this, but for the rest of the returning viewers, you already know the drill. Okay, so this was the breakdown for this month for the different decks that were played among the top 25 players. You see that most of the matches involved Cyberse Eldlich, one of the many 60 card pile decks that are running rampant in the current format. After that we have Prank Kids, which is one of many decks that are getting a huge buff from the Brave token engine. After that is Phantom Knight, which is actually surprising in the sense that this deck hasn't had much representation among my meta-analyses, even though at the start of the format people expected Phantom Knights to be the best deck. After that we have Floowandereeze, which is really just tearing it up since the release of their quick play spell and topping many events as an anti-meta strategy. After that I have the Water Enchantress here to represent other Brave DPE pile decks, which involved both Based and also Brave Tenyi. Ideally I'd like to split them, but realistically going through the replays sometimes I couldn't even tell which one they were playing based on the cards they drew, so I just combined them together. And then we have Dragon Link, which just never dies and is in meta contention again as usual. And then we have some other rogue strategies such as Ad Ignister and Drytron, which I suppose can be argued for tier 2. We do see him for Noble Black again in the top ranked, as well as some Tri-Brigade Melfi deck. There were some other decks such as True Draco of all things and Virtual World. So compare that to last month, and Cyberse Eldlich was yet again the most played among the top ranked. One thing that's disappeared is Sword Soul. I mean, we have the Brave Tenyi pile now, so I don't know if that also kind of counts as Sword Soul. I don't know, lately a lot of the decks have just become really hard to categorize. You had some rogue options last time though, like ABC and MathMech, and we saw a good chunk of Sky Striker last time in comparison to zero representation at all for this month. As for the overall breakdown, our top 25 players won 72% of their matches, and in terms of playstyle, this can get a little difficult when you have something like Cyberse Eldlich pile that has a mix of playstyles. I did ultimately categorize all of these pile decks as combo though, so we do have a ton of them this month compared to usual, and this might be the highest proportion of combo decks played among the top 25 since I started doing these analyses. And then you have a small bit of mid-range decks like Dogmatica Invoked or Tri-Brigade, and a little bit of control decks something like Flu and True Draco. If you look at the breakdown for last month, the win percentages, it was pretty much the same, and you did have a lot more control decks because there was a lot more representation from Flu and Sky Striker last month. Now to cover the top 5 decks in more detail as usual, starting with Cyberse Eldlich, which won an insane 79% of their matches. I know there's a lot of pile decks going on right now, but from a win percentage point of view, as well as its top representation among the top ranked, perhaps this is the best one. I don't think it reaches the power level of the Jet Synchron days of Eldlich combo, but it's definitely a formidable strategy. When the top players won the die roll using this deck, they won 85% of their matches, but also won an insane 75% of their matches even when they lost the die roll. Lots of hand traps, and the Brave engine can also be good going second with the Draco back, so it seems pretty balanced. As for its play among all players online in the last 7 days, this gets difficult to do because YGOscope is not going to categorize this deck properly. For example, if you look on YGOscope for Brave Eldlich hero, then you know it's Cyberse Eldlich. But at the same time, sometimes the deck can be categorized as just Eldlich as well, so the data for this deck won't be too accurate. Anyways, if you look specifically at Brave Eldlich hero, then among all players, they still won an impressive 67% of their matches in the last 7 days. Next up is Prank Kids, which only just a couple months ago at the start of the new format, this was the most played deck among the top players. They still won a pretty decent 66% of their matches, and if you look at the results by die roll, the win percentages were pretty much the same as well. The Brave engine really helps this deck out in terms of being able to chain block their Prank Kid monster effects, but also providing that Omni Negate as well to stop something like Nibiru. Among all players, it was a really popular choice, and it was played the second most in the last 7 days, and the 58% win percentage among all players, despite how often it's being played, that's not bad at all. Then we have the resurgence of Phantom Knights among the top ranked, where it won an absolute insane 81% of the matches, but small sample sizes as usual of course. By die roll it gets even scarier considering that they won 90% of their matches when they won the die roll versus a still impressive 71% when they lost the die roll. The deck is most known for its Scythe lock, but with the Brave engine release they also incorporated that as well, although for some they opt to do one or the other because of bricking issues. If the Scythe lock isn't enough, they typically have at least one Fog Blade to stop a monster effect and attack on top of that as well. Now among all players, this stat is also a bit limited on YGOscope because the site categorizes Phantom Knights as Burning Abyss or Burning Abyss Hero, so I did both of those categories for this number. But keep in mind that technically we are potentially including actual pure Burning Abyss deck numbers as well, and their low win percentage and 50% might potentially be a result of that. Next we have Floowandereeze, which has fallen a bit in representation among the top rank this time around, and also with a 65% win percentage, which is a dip from last month. By die roll, the results didn't seem to matter. The deck has been taking the meta by storm lately, where their new quick play spell really helps them dodge Imperm or Veiler even better, and have a more consistent access to their field spell, which really gets them going. Dimension Shifter is also really powerful as well, making most decks just pass right away. Among all players, it was the most played deck in the last 7 days, at an impressive 59 win percentage to boot. Not sure how you would even hit this deck on the next ban list. I think the hits would probably be more indirect than actual direct Floowandereeze card hits. And lastly, we have what I'm just clumping as the Brave DPE pile, which of course is excluding Cyberse Eldlich in the numbers here, since that deck is also technically a Brave DPE pile. Anyways, for this one, as I mentioned earlier, is a combination of both Based and Brave Tenyi pile deck, just because it was really hard to differentiate between the two from just seeing the replay sometimes. The pile deck won 62% of the matches, and by die roll did not differ too much. A deck like this may represent some of the complaints very well, because you just slap the Brave Engine and DPE package on everything and you just run with it. It certainly is interesting though that there's so many 60 card pile decks lately, and they're doing really well too. As for the data on all players in the last 7 days, this gets really difficult to categorize on YGO Scope, so I can't provide reliable data here. I am secretly hoping that with the next ban list we move away towards from these mishmash of decks, so that from a data perspective it can get back to being a little easier for me in terms of deck categorization. Alright guys, so that was it for this month's meta analysis. Hope that was helpful as some of you prepare to attend some in-person YCS events this weekend. As always, I want to thank my patrons Eileen Dice Queen, Bolt Spider, Cybernetic, and Brandon Jaren. It really does mean a lot that you are helping a tiny channel like me. You guys can check out my Patreon link as well if you have the time. Take care guys.